Elon Musk has something to tell you, and only you. Archangel Michael says. Tonight the air trembles like a wire humming in the dark, and a quiet doorway opens where you least expect it. A message slips through that doorway, carrying the weight of 10,000 impossible mornings, and it is addressed to you alone. It arrives without thunder, without ceremony, just a hush that settles over your room and turns the ordinary into a signal. You sense it first as a pulse, the way a city feels the subway beneath its feet, the way a forest knows when the wind is about to change. A presence steps forward from the edge of your attention and speaks your name as if it is a launch code. It is steady, measured, and unafraid, the voice of a traveler who has made a habit of crossing horizons. He does not introduce himself with titles or trophies. He speaks the way light travels, direct, unblinking, determined to reach its target. He says he has watched the gears of your life grind and spark, and he knows where the metal is tired and where the fire is still bright. He talks about beginnings that look like endings, and endings that are simply turning points with the labels taped on wrong. He tells you that breakthroughs are not fireworks but slow-burn engines, built bolt by bolt in the quiet hours when no one is looking. He reminds you that the world does not open for noise, it opens for momentum. He describes a workshop that exists in your mind, a place where you are both inventor and invention. He says you have been waiting for permission and calling that patience. He says patience is useful, but permission is a door you can build yourself. He shows you the blueprint and asks you to notice that it has your handwriting on it. He talks about risk without romance. He tells you that risk is not a cliff, it is a staircase in the dark. You do not need to see the top to take the next step. You do not need applause to keep climbing. What you need is the truth you already carry and the willingness to let it lead. He lays a console before you, sleek and simple, with a red button you have spent years avoiding. The label says, "Attempt." Your hands hover, remembering every time you have hesitated, every time you promised yourself, tomorrow, every time you let the fear of embarrassment disguise itself as strategy. The console hums with everything you have not done yet, and it is louder than any regret. He tells you a secret you already know. Every expert you admire began as a stranger to their own skill. Every master walked into a room where no one knew their name and turned that room into a launching pad. The trick is not to be fearless. The trick is to be faithful to the next action. He talks about engines because engines make sense. Engines ask for fuel, tolerance, and airflow. Your life asks for purpose, resilience, and space. Engines overheat when they are choked. You overheat when you compress yourself into other people's expectations. Engines fail when contaminants slip into the system. You fail when small untruths crowd out your precision. Engines soar when every piece cooperates. You soar when everything you do obeys the mission. He studies you the way a pilot studies weather, not to be impressed by storms but to route through them. He sees the front you have been flying toward, the crossed winds of opinion and noise, the turbulence of mixed signals. He draws a line on the map that threads between clouds. He reminds you that altitude is not arrogance. It is safety purchased by clarity. He talks about time like a resource to be engineered, not endured. He tells you there are hours ahead that will multiply if you treat them right, and there are minutes that will dissolve if you hand them to distraction. He suggests you audit your attention the way a launch director audits a checklist. There is a line item for rest. There is a line item for reflection. There is a line item for boldness. He describes the way a rocket shakes when it is most alive. The shakes are not a warning, they are a confirmation that the forces you harness are meeting the forces that resist you. Your heartbeat will do the same. Your palms will do the same. When the trembling starts, it means you are crossing thresholds and the threshold is answering back. He looks at your doubts without flinching. He does not argue with them, he assigns them jobs. One doubt becomes quality control, asking hard questions about your design. Another becomes safety, calculating margins and contingencies. The rest are sent outside to hold the door closed against the draft. Doubts without assignments become critics, doubts with assignments become engineers. He places a small, ordinary object on the table between you, something from your everyday life, a pen or a key or a folded receipt. He explains that even this object crosses worlds for you. It is proof that the distance between who you were and who you will be is bridged by the simplest tool in your reach. You do not need a miracle to begin. You need a handle to turn. He talks about failure in the past tense, even if it happened yesterday. He calls it data. He calls it signal. He calls it trajectory correction. He never calls it identity. He never lets it write your name in permanent ink. He tells you a secret about failure you were never taught. It is a superb negotiator when you make it sit on your side of the table. He unrolls a timeline, not a prophecy. There are no guaranteed outcomes, only guaranteed inputs. Input 1 is focus, input 2 is repetition, input 3 is feedback. Input 4 is the promise you keep to yourself when no one is watching. He draws an arrow through the week ahead and asks you to commit to a single motion that would make next week unrecognizable to this one. He asks you to gather your unfinished work, not to scold it but to unify it. He says scattered effort is expensive, integrated effort is exponential. He shows you how the same energy that spins a wheel can spin a constellation if you align the hubs. He invites you to name the mission aloud so it can stop hiding behind smaller names. He brings up the people who do not understand you yet. He calls them lagging indicators. He explains that understanding always arrives late to innovation, that acceptance is slow because safety is slow, and that you are not obligated to delay yourself until everyone catches up. He suggests compassion without compromise, kindness without surrender, and progress without apology. He reminds you that pioneers are often lonely because they are ahead, not because they are wrong. He points to the map again. There are tracks you can follow, and there are tracks you can make. You may choose either, but one path requires you to be brave about being watched, and the other path requires you to be brave about not being seen. Both require dignity. Both require discipline. He asks you to design a cockpit for your day, 3 gauges only. Gauge 1 measures momentum in small units completed. Gauge 2 measures attention in minutes of depth. Gauge 3 measures integrity in promises kept. He tells you that when the cockpit is simple, you will fly farther. Complexity is sometimes just fear wearing a lab coat. He brings the conversation to money, not as an idol but as a tool. He talks about wealth as throughput, not a trophy case. He asks you to treat every resource like a river, direct it, filter it, measure it, let it power turbines, and ensure it returns cleaner than it arrived. He reminds you that generosity is not a leak, it is a design choice that multiplies flow. He pauses at the threshold of your old story and nods toward a door you have not opened because it never looked grand enough to be a door. It looks like an email you have postponed, a conversation you have feared, a habit you have avoided. He says the door you are avoiding is the lever you need. He says the lever is the baton that will conduct the next movement. He talks about reputation the way sailors talk about wind, useful, unreliable, and subject to change. He advises you to seek accuracy over admiration. Accuracy will pay your bills and sharpen your tools. Admiration will spend you and leave you thirsty. When accuracy and admiration shake hands, be grateful. When they argue, choose the one that helps you build. He asks for a ledger of your excuses and offers you a trade. You give him one excuse, and he gives you one experiment. You surrender the sentence that begins with, "I can't because," and he returns a small test you can run within a day. The experiment succeeds or fails, but either way you collect data, and data moves the arrow forward. He acknowledges the weight you carry that no one sees. He does not call it weakness, and he does not call it destiny. He calls it mass. He says mass times acceleration equals force, and you are not missing force, you are missing acceleration. If you accelerate even slightly, the mass becomes momentum. The same load that once slowed you will press your feet into the ground so you can launch. He offers you a new vocabulary that does not flatter your fear. Impossible becomes unproven. Later becomes scheduled. Someday becomes a date on a calendar with a time and a duration and a deliverable. Words are switches, and your life runs on circuits made from what you repeat. Speak like an engineer building a bridge you intend to cross. He speaks of mentors and rivals. Mentors are mirrors that tilt forward, they reflect a version of you that is slightly ahead. Rivals are mirrors that tilt sideways, they show you angles you missed. Both can be teachers when you treat them as signals rather than verdicts. He encourages you to keep the counsel of the builders and to tune out the theater of the bored. He puts a hand on the back of your doubt and guides it gently toward the door. Doubt lingers because it thinks it is keeping you safe. He thanks it for its service and gives it a badge that says, "Tester, not Captain." Your ship is not steered by a voice that only knows how to say no. Your ship is steered by a direction that knows how to say now. He tells you that starting small is not a compromise, it is a cheat code. He lists 3 acts smaller than your fear: sending a message, building a prototype, cleaning a workspace. He says the world changes because some people make tiny bets relentlessly. He says the compound interest of tiny bets is sovereignty. He lowers his voice the way people do when they are about to disclose coordinates. He gives you an instruction, straightforward and immediate. Do one brave thing today that closes an old loop. Do one meticulous thing today that improves your process by 5%. Do one generous thing today that improves someone else's day by more than you will ever know. He introduces the gravity of the next season without melodrama. He says momentum will test your joints, and success will expose your seams. He urges you to build redundancy into your habits, to over-communicate before you need to, and to automate what steals your attention without earning it. He tells you the real flex is reliability. He takes out a marker and draws a circle around your name. Around that circle he adds 3 words: build, serve, endure. Build without vanity. Serve without bitterness. Endure without theatrics. He says if you can do those 3, the rest will rearrange itself into patterns that lift rather than trap. He tells you that silence is a tool you have underused. Not the silence of avoidance but the silence of alignment. He invites you to add 15 quiet minutes to the start of your day where your mind is a launch bay and your heart is ground control. He says you will hear instructions there that you cannot hear when you scroll. He smiles, not because anything is easy, but because you finally understand the difference between difficulty and doom. Difficulty is a hill. Doom is a myth you rehearse when you are tired. Hills exist to be climbed or rerouted, and you are allowed to switch back as many times as needed. Pride does not get a vote on your pathing, progress does. He points at your calendar and asks you to draw 2 lines. One line under the day you will submit your next thing. Another line under the day you will review the results without self-harm. He says the first line makes you brave, the second line makes you wise. Both lines make you free. He stands, and a quiet follows, the kind that stops the mind from scattering. He nods once, a ritual between builders. He does not bless your luck because your luck does not need blessing. He blesses your discipline. He blesses your stubborn grace. He blesses the way you will keep showing up after this room is empty. He leaves you with a truth that does not blink. The world is not waiting to believe in you. The world is waiting to see what you build so it can believe in what is possible. You are not responsible for applause. You are responsible for ignition. Light it once. Light it again. Light it until the night knows your name. You walk to the window and notice that the city has the same heartbeat as the console on the table. You picture the staircase in the dark and how each step appears only when your foot moves. You picture the red button labeled "Attempt," and you realize that hesitation has tried to make itself your heritage, but it is only a habit. You reach out. You press the button. It is not dramatic, but it is decisive. Somewhere inside you, engines spin to life. Somewhere ahead, a new trajectory plots itself with your first small motion as its origin point. The room does not explode, it deepens. You move your chair, clear the table, sharpen the pencil, open the file. You make a list that is not beautiful but is built for action. You commit to a sprint that is short enough to begin and long enough to matter. You call this a launch window and protect it like you would protect oxygen. The message lands in your chest with a weight that comforts. It does not ask you to be a myth. It asks you to be a mechanism for good pressure. It asks you to become the kind of person who starts things that finish themselves because the systems are honest and the aim is true. The night leans in one last time and gives you back your name, polished from use, stronger from friction. You recognize yourself in the reflection, not as the hero in a poster but as the builder who kept building. You are the proof. You are the pattern. You are the pilot and the payload. You close your eyes and see a runway, a countdown, and a horizon. The numbers tick, steady and unafraid. The air hums with total possibility. You are not behind. You are not late. You are precisely where a launch begins, at the edge of decision, with enough fuel to make history in your own size. The room returns. The city breathes. Somewhere, a factory light turns on, and so does yours. The message is complete, and the work is ready for you. Step into it. Keep the gauges simple. Keep the promises real. Keep the engines clean. Nothing else is needed. If you wish to express your support further, you have the option to give super thanks, with contributions of up to $20. Picking up right where the room deepens and the console hums, you let the new rhythm anchor you. The world narrows to a clean runway and a short list of actions that actually move mass. The air tastes like metal and rain, the familiar flavor of work that matters. Archangel Michael says momentum is a covenant, not a mood. You keep the covenant by doing the next precise thing with a steady hand. You honor it by refusing the glittering detours that never built a single engine. The message turns practical without losing its electricity. A launch requires staging, and your life is ready for stages that separate cleanly. Stage 1 burns for ignition, Stage 2 for altitude, Stage 3 for orbit that does not wobble. You outfit Stage 1 with 3 moves you can execute today. Close a loop you have been dragging like a chain. Simplify the path for a task that sprawled into drama. Secure a boundary that leaks your focus and calls itself generosity. You outfit Stage 2 with structure. A block of deep work that begins at the same time daily and ends with a measurable artifact. A block of learning that sharpens the blade you swing. A block of review that turns noise into guidance and praise into fuel. You outfit Stage 3 with stewardship. Systems that protect your attention when you are tired. Routines that catch you when your ambition outruns your care. Rituals that remind your heart why the work deserves your devotion. The messenger speaks again like a pilot reading a checklist. Avionics on with clarity of purpose. Guidance on with a plan sketched in ink you cannot smudge. Telemetry on with metrics that do not lie, even when the truth arrives with heat. He invites you to write the short charter for your next mission. A sentence that names what you will ship, a line that names who it serves, and a promise that names how it will behave under stress. The charter fits on a single card and travels with you like a passport. He gestures to the hangar of old ideas stacked like crates against the far wall. Some were heavy because they belonged to a different season. Some were beautiful because they belonged to someone else. You reclaim only what still fits your hands, and you release the rest without ceremony. He reminds you that craft is devotion measured in quiet repetitions. The same cut made cleaner. The same line made truer. The same delivery made sturdier. What you repeat with care becomes a signature the world can recognize in a crowd. He returns to the red button labeled attempt and smiles at the way your posture has changed. The flinch is gone, replaced by an engineer's calm. You do not reach for applause, and you do not negotiate with stall. You execute, read the data, refine, and execute again. The second message arrives wrapped in stillness. Stability is not stagnation, and speed is not panic. The fastest ships are the ones that remove drag and honor the line between urgency and frenzy. You begin to remove drag with an audit sharper than rumor. Devices go to sleep during deep work. Incoming requests queue where you choose to see them. Context switches stop stealing the oxygen your ideas need to burn. You set a metronome for effort you can keep through weather. The tick that carries you across mediocre hours without self-betrayal. The talk that marks your rest like a non-negotiable friend. Cadence becomes grace. He lays out 7 thresholds you will cross without drama. The threshold of starting before you are ready. The threshold of continuing after the first dip feels like a verdict. The threshold of finishing when perfection tries to split your spine. The threshold of releasing when silence tempts you to hoard. The threshold of learning when feedback presses your ribs. The threshold of iterating when pride wants a statue. The threshold of scaling when fear whispers about exposure. Each threshold arrives with a sensation in the body. A weight behind the eyes, a pressure in the chest, a hum in the hands. You learn to name the sensation as a sign of progress, not a summons to retreat. The map becomes tactile. He speaks briefly of visibility like a weather report. Some days the world will see you and cheer. Some days the world will look away and keep walking. Neither weather pattern decides whether you fly. You choose a signal that matters more than noise. Delivered work, refined process, steady integrity. These three braid together into a rope that pulls you across rough ground. He asks you to define the smallest shippable improvement to your craft. A tighter loop. A cleaner handoff. A clearer onboarding. Small is holy because small gets done and done gets learned. He names the canopy you will carry when heat arrives. Grace for yourself that is firm without being cruel. Grace for others that is kind without being naive. Grace for the timeline that respects compounding more than theater. You feel how the room keeps yielding new levels with the same steady discipline. The work looks different in each light but answers to the same principles. Alignment over image. Throughput over performance. Reliability over sparkle. He invites you to establish a witness to your own effort. A ledger where you write what you built, what you fixed, what you learned. The ledger becomes a counterweight against the myths your fatigue tries to invent. The truth of the line items rescues you from the fog. He marks a circle on the floor and calls it a commitment ring. What stands inside the ring receives your best. What stands outside waits its turn. What tries to straddle the line gets moved or removed with a clear, quiet hand. He hands you a phrase to carry into difficult rooms. I build for reality. Reality includes constraints, users, deadlines, budgets. Reality includes your limits and your brilliance. Reality is not your enemy when you collaborate with it like a seasoned partner. A new segment begins like the hush before liftoff. You calibrate your gauges with accurate baselines so progress can be measured without fantasy. You log the first readings with the respect a pilot gives instruments that save lives. You make peace with the unglamorous tasks that guard the glamorous goals. Versioning that prevents chaos. Documentation that multiplies your future self. Communication that turns teams into orchestras. Excellence wears overalls and speaks softly. He reminds you that compounding has cousins. Compounding effort, compounding skill, compounding trust. Each interest rate grows when you keep your promises, especially the promises you make to a calendar block when no one is watching. The messenger shifts from instruction to benediction without changing his tone. The blessing lands like a weightlifter's belt, tightening your center so you can lift without tearing. Strength arrives as a pattern, not a flash. He grants you permission to outgrow the rooms that shrink you. The leaving can be quiet and dignified. The gratitude can be real and unperformed. The new rooms will ask more and pay better in meaning. He points to the runway and names the 3 flights circling your tower. The flight of craft, the flight of character, the flight of contribution. When they land and refuel in harmony, your field becomes a small, dependable airport for good in the world. You decide to keep the airport open with hours you can sustain. You decide to keep the lights bright for landings that arrive late. You decide to keep the radios clear of chatter that never carried a single plane home. A final sequence begins with your hands on the work that is yours alone to do. The tools feel honest. The chair feels earned. The horizon feels closer than rumor and farther than fantasy, which means it is finally real. You draft, ship, review, refactor. You teach what you know without starving the part of you that learns. You say yes where it multiplies, no where it dilutes, later where it protects the mission. You recognize that the person who pressed attempt has become the person who interprets telemetry. You are no longer guessing. You are listening to readings you created by moving with courage and care. The city outside keeps breathing, and the hum inside your chest keeps time with it. This season will not need slogans to stand. It will need your faithful minutes and your unshowy resolve. It will need the rituals that renew you when the world forgets to clap. You step into the corridor of your day and the walls feel wider. The tools wait where you placed them last night. The plan is not extravagant, and the plan is enough. You carry it like a flight plan and treat detours as sky, not failure. The message does not promise you ease. It hands you something better. It hands you stewardship over a life that will not be wasted. It hands you ballast and lift in equal measure. When you look back at the console, the red button no longer glows like a dare. It glows like a habit you intend to keep. Attempt is not a single act anymore. Attempt is an identity. You return to the window and see the thin line where morning will break. The line is a contract you can sign with work and rest. The light will show up, and so will you. The day will open, and you will meet it like a pilot with a clear sky and a job to do.